I work at a wildlife sanctuary outside Brisbane. Last month, an American family arrived wearing matching khaki safari outfits. The dad walked up to our kangaroo enclosure and asked where we kept the dangerous ones. I pointed at the kangaroos. He laughed. No, like the actual wild animals. I told him kangaroos were wild animals. He shook his head. These are basically deer. Where are the killer ones? I explained kangaroos could disembowel humans with their claws. He looked at his wife and said, "Honey, they're exaggerating for tips." This is the kind of first-hand absurdity you only get when you actually work in the wild, not when you Google it. I document these real encounters every week, so if you prefer the truth over travel brochure fantasy, you'll want to stay tuned. He then asked if we had real Australian animals like koalas. We do. I took them to the koala habitat. He wanted to hold one. I explained, koalas have chlamydia and razor-sharp claws. He said, in America, we have bears. I think I can handle a teddy bear. Before I could stop him, he reached toward a koala. It hissed like a demon possessed. He jumped back and asked if we'd trained it to do that. His 10-year-old son asked if Australian animals were defective. Another tourist demanded a refund because our crocodiles looked fake. She insisted real crocodiles moved more. Ours were sunbathing. She said American alligators were more active, so ours must be animatronics. I told her to throw something in the water if she wanted movement. She declined. Left a review saying we had robot reptiles. Americans arrive here expecting a petting zoo. What they get is a reality check delivered by creatures that genuinely do not care about their comfort. A California couple visited our sanctuary and immediately went to the cassowary enclosure. The husband asked if they were Australian ostriches. I said no. Cassowaries were the world's most dangerous bird. He laughed. It's a bird. I explained their claws could slice through bone. He told his wife classic tourist trap fear-mongering. He then asked why we kept them behind such a tall fence. I said because cassowaries kill people. He responded, birds don't kill people. That's propaganda. I showed him warning signs with documented attacks. He read them and said, this is like when zoos pretend penguins bite. His wife wanted a photo next to the fence. The cassowary charged the barrier. She screamed. He said, see? Trained to scare tourists? They left convinced we'd choreographed it. Moments like this are why I started sharing these stories. Most visitors think Australia's danger is a performance. It's not. If you want the unfiltered version of this continent, subscribe now, because most people will never see it from this angle. Later, he wrote a blog post titled Australia's Fake Danger Culture. Said we exaggerate threats to sell merchandise. Bought zero merchandise. A Texas woman arrived insisting on seeing a platypus. We explained they're nocturnal and in low-light habitats. She demanded we wake one up because she'd flown all the way from Dallas. Well, I said, platypuses are venomous. She said, they're the size of footballs. How venomous could they be? I told her male platypuses have venomous spurs that cause excruciating pain for months. She said months? That's physically impossible. She then accused us of making up facts. Said she'd researched platypuses online and nowhere mentioned venom. I pulled up scientific articles. She skimmed one and said, this is from an Australian website. Obviously biased. I asked what would convince her. She said, an American source. I found a Smithsonian article. She said the Smithsonian gets things wrong. Sometimes. She left insisting, platypuses were basically beavers with duck. Bills wrote that we spread misinformation about harmless animals. Her review included the line, don't trust Australian wildlife experts. An American college group visited during our snake demonstration. Our guide showed them an eastern brown snake and explained it's the world's second most venomous snake. One student raised his hand and asked, but like, compared to rattlesnakes? Our guide said brown snakes are exponentially more venomous. The student said, doubt it? Rattlesnakes are famous. Another student asked why we didn't have antivenom nearby. We do. It's standard protocol. She said, then what's the danger if there's antivenom? Our guide explained antivenom doesn't guarantee survival without immediate treatment. She responded, that sounds made up. Medicine is medicine. A third student asked if he could touch the snake for Instagram. He said absolutely not. He asked why Australian snakes were so uptight. Said American snakes were chill. Our guide asked which American snakes he'd touched. He said, none, but I've seen videos. He then asked if our snakes were trained to be aggressive for effect. We explained wild animals aren't trained. He said, everything's trained. Even wild animals get conditioned. They left convinced our danger warnings were marketing tactics. Posted photos with captions like Australia tries too hard to be scary. A New York tourist confidently told me Australia doesn't have seasons. Is asked what he meant. He said, it's always summer here. Explained, we have winter. He said, not real winter. Like, you don't get snow. I told him our mountains get snow. Ski resorts exist. He said, ski resorts in Australia? That's a gimmick. I showed him photos of Australian ski fields. He studied them and said, that's probably New Zealand. I assured him they were Australian. He said, same thing. It's all down there together. He then asked why our animals were so weird. I said, millions of years of isolated evolution. He responded, but why didn't they evolve normally? I asked what normally meant. He said, like American animals? Regular stuff. I pointed out America has unique wildlife too. He said, yeah, but ours makes sense. Yours are like science experiments. Spent 20 minutes trying to convince me kangaroos were genetically modified because nature wouldn't make something that hops, said hopping was, inefficient. I explained, kangaroos are highly efficient. He said, then why don't other places have them? I said, isolated evolution. He repeated, that doesn't make sense. He left, insisting Australian wildlife was suspicious. A Florida woman asked where the Australian jungle was. I said, we don't have jungles. We have rainforests and bushland. She said, that's a jungle. Explain the difference. She said, jungle is jungle. You're splitting hairs. I told her most of Australia is arid or semi-arid. She said, that can't be right. I've seen pictures. It's green. Explained those pictures were from coastal regions. She said, so the rest is fake? She then asked where we kept Australia's big cats. I don't have big cats. She said, every continent has big cats. I listed continents without native big cats. She said, Australia's huge. There's definitely big cats. I explained our apex predators are crocodiles and dingoes. She said, dingoes are dogs. That doesn't count, said they're wild canines. She responded, still not big. Cats, she insisted we were hiding something, and left convinced Australia had a secret big cat population, wrote. A blog post theorizing Australian wildlife. Authorities suppress big cat sightings for tourism. Reasons. An American man asked if our spiders were really that dangerous or just hyped. I said some species are deadly. He said, define deadly. I explained funnel web spider venom can kill within hours. He said hours. That's not deadly. Deadly is instant. I clarified deadly means capable of causing death. He said, with modern medicine, nothing's deadly anymore. He then asked how many people actually die from spiders annually. I said very few because of anti-venom and public awareness. He said, exactly. So they're not dangerous. I explained, they're dangerous but manageable with treatment. He said, that's not how danger works. Either it kills you or it doesn't. He spotted a huntsman spider on the wall. Not dangerous, but large. He asked what it was. I said, huntsman? He said, that's the deadly one, right? I explained huntsmans are harmless. He said, something that big isn't harmless. I reiterated, they don't bite humans. He said, but they could. I said, theoretically, but they don't. He responded, so you admit they're dangerous. Left convinced all Australian spiders were death traps, regardless of facts. Told other tourists we downplay spider risks. Last week, a couple from Nevada visited during feeding time. We were feeding our saltwater crocodile. The husband asked if he could help feed it. We said no. He asked why. I explained it's a 4-meter crocodile that could kill him instantly. He said, I've been fishing in lakes with gators my whole life. Told him saltwater crocodiles are far more aggressive than alligators. He said, "A croc's a croc." He then explained that American alligators were basically the same thing, and he'd been around them plenty. I asked if he'd ever hand-fed an alligator. He said no, but he'd seen them up close from a boat. I explained being in a boat and hand-feeding are vastly different. He said, "How different can it be?" I said one involves safety and distance, the other involves losing limbs. He laughed. "You Australians are so dramatic." His wife asked if crocodiles were smart enough to recognize feeders. I said yes, they're highly intelligent. She said so it wouldn't attack you because it knows you. I explained crocodiles are opportunistic predators that don't care about relationships. She said, "That seems mean. Why don't you train them better?" I said you can't train crocodiles like dogs. She responded, "Everything can be trained with enough patience." The husband watched our keeper feed the crocodile from a safe distance with a pole. He said, "See? Not that dangerous if you're careful." I said that's exactly the point. Extreme caution is required. I said in America, we have gator farms where people wrestle them. "This is overkill," I asked. If he'd ever wrestled an alligator. I said no, but I could if I wanted to. They left insisting Australian wildlife warnings were overblown. The husband told other tourists we were paranoid. His wife posted a photo with our crocodile in the background captioned, "Australians think this is scary, lol." Working at an Australian wildlife sanctuary means daily conversations with Americans who think nature follows comfort rules. They arrive expecting animals that comply with their expectations, kangaroos that act like deer, koalas that cuddle, crocodiles that pose. What they find instead are creatures shaped by millions of years of evolution that genuinely do not care about human assumptions. They leave confused, sometimes offended, often convinced we've exaggerated everything. The animals, meanwhile, continue, being exactly what they've always been, wild, efficient, and utterly indifferent to American comfort myths. If that perspective hits home, imagine having this kind of clarity every week. I document what really happens when comfort meets reality, so if that's the kind of honesty you value, lock in now. Subscribing just keeps you from missing what others will deny. If you've survived Australian wildlife, or watched someone confidently underestimate it, these stories aren't exaggerations, they're documentaries. Next time, we'll explore what happens when Americans encounter Australian weather systems. Spoiler, they don't believe those either.